I've been doing comedy in some form or another since I was 16. Made an animated short, did really well online. I think it's got like 3 or 4 million views on TikTok. I don't know how I'm going to pay for this. That's going to make you a million times more proud of the thing.
So I like to start these interviews off with one question to everyone. What is your current favorite song at the moment?
Oh God, what is my current favorite song at the moment? So I currently am on an AJJ Jag. If you're familiar with them,
Yeah.
they have a song called "Getting Naked Playing with Guns." So I like that. That's my immediate first thing I'm saying in this podcast. Basically, okay. So info dump about me. I'm a really big professional wrestling fan, and if you are not familiar with AJJ, they're I guess I would say not really a pro wrestling vibe. They're very chill. And a pro wrestler that I like just tweeted about, like, oh, that'd be really funny if the theme song from pro wrestling was "Getting Naked Playing with Guns" by HHA. And then I just, in my mind, was like, okay, when does the pyro go off in that song? And then that put me on this big, HHA jag of just like listening to all their albums again. I was listening to it literally while I was getting ready for this.
Awesome.
Getting naked and playing with guns. There's a gerbil in the microwave.
So I'm here with Joey Clift. And first of all, I want to congratulate you on your film getting into DeadCenter. So congrats on that.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, the film has a lot of really great Oklahoma connections, and I'm so excited to screen it here.
Yeah. So I like to get into the parts of creativity because I find in your 20s, the creativity journey is really difficult because you're defining yourself and finding the certain ways that you want to explore your creativity. So I kind of want to start with the beginning before we even get to your newest short film here. I want to get into like where you started. I kind of read that you started going to be a weatherman because you didn't see anyone like you being on the newscaster, basically. And then from that, you transitioned to comedy. So can you kind of take me through that journey a little bit?
Yeah, for sure. First off, thank you for thinking I'm in my 20s. I'm wearing all these glasses. This is to hide my horribly weathered face. But thank you so much for asking that. So my story is I'm an enrolled member of the Cowlitz Indian tribe and grew up on the Tulalip Reservation in Washington State. Growing up, I didn't see any Native American comedians on TV, but I loved comedy. So I went to school for what to me felt like the next best thing, which was to be like a small market TV weather guy. It just felt like an attainable way to kind of get paid making people laugh. And fortunately, when I was in college, a bunch of my professors kind of pulled me aside and said, hey, you could just work in comedy, right? And I was like, what? That's crazy. So after that, I moved to Los Angeles and really just dove into the Los Angeles comedy scene with both feet, doing comedy at places like the Upright Citizens Brigade Theater, Second City, the Groundlings, and all that stuff. And, really just worked my way up through writing for various TV shows and cartoons and things like that. And so it's definitely a windy journey for sure.
Yeah. So that kind of brings me on to your next project. So forget me if I'm wrong here, but you eventually got to a point where you were doing a series for Comedy Central. They were kind of partnering with you, and you made I'm forgetting the name at the moment. But it's
all of the names are very long and unwieldy, so I will. So apologies.
Yeah. But you basically were telling these stories that are really personal to you, and putting a comedy twist on it, if you will. So kind of take me to where from you were doing comedy to eventually starting to make these shorts, if you will, about the comedy experience of your life and stuff like that. So
my experiences were. I've been doing comedy in some form or another since I was probably like 16, hosting talent shows at my high school, writing little jokes in my English 101 papers in college and all of that stuff. And while I was doing that, I didn't necessarily know that comedy is the thing that I wanted to do. And, the jokes that I was writing weren't necessarily like native focused. Like when I started in the Los Angeles comedy scene, I was just writing a lot of, like sketch comedy videos about Spider-Man or whatever, just like whatever nerd thing that everybody else was writing about. And at a certain point, I realized that I was at the time, one of only a few Native folks that were getting sort of opportunities in mainstream spaces. So, I kind of hit this point of realizing like, oh, it's like cool that I know how to write a million jokes about Batman or whatever. But it would probably be better, and also better for my soul, to, tackle like Native identity and what it means to be Native and all of those kind of weird intricacies. So in 2018, I made an animated short called Telling People You're Native American When You're Not Native is a lot like telling a bear you're a bear when you're not a bear. Title is 24 words long. It's like when I came up with the title, I did not know I'd have to say it a lot. I made it just to screen it at a UCB show in LA, and it, it blew up. It got screened at like the Smithsonian just for laughs. And it, did really well online. I think it's got like 3 or 4 million views on TikTok at this point. And that got me on the radar of, folks at Comedy Central. And then that led to, developing more shorts with them, and then them distributing other shorts, and just created a really great partnership, which for me is like so cool and full circle because, I grew up not knowing if I was like allowed to be a comedian, and to go from that to, having my work distributed by this like major comedy brand, the same people that distribute South Park or whatever. Yeah. It's just like so cool and full circle. And we won like a Webby Award last year, which is really
Congrats.
cool. Oh, thanks. Yeah. I have the Webby Award statue is in my background when I'm on Zoom, very strategically placed on the desk behind me. So I could be like, oh, wait, what is that? Oh, sorry, the sun's glinting off my Webby. But it's just a really cool full circle moment to, come into my own as somebody telling, jokes and stories from like a Native perspective.
Yeah. And I want to go a little bit like deeper into that too, because that transition, like you said, you were writing like superhero jokes, and then making that transition to be more a personal one. Was there like a really difficulty that you had to come to grasp with doing that? Or was it like, no, this always felt right to me, I want to do this? Like, what was the dichotomy of you kind of fighting with yourself of doing the superhero stuff to doing the more stuff that you have a personal experience with?
I think that with a lot of that, a lot of what I was working on in that period was like my culture has always been a really big part of my life. Like I'm an enrolled member of my tribe, and I have been involved in Native Hollywood, which is sort of the loose collection of 500 or so Native folks that work in the entertainment industry since I moved to Los Angeles. Like before I even started taking UCB classes. And for a long time, my Native self and my alt comedy weirdo self were kind of like two different tracks. Yeah. And they didn't really intersect because they didn't really have like an opportunity to intersect. And part of it is that when I was in writers' rooms or writing on TV shows, there's like this really big gulf between what non-natives know about Native stuff. So it's difficult when you're a writer to pitch a joke about fry bread if nobody in the writer's room knows what fry bread is, So I guess I just felt a lot of really weird pushback that kind of made me feel like there wasn't really a space for those kinds of jokes. And then, due to the encouragement of a lot of friends, and also just realizing that like, because I'm not seeing those jokes in those spaces is like even more reason to tell those jokes. At a certain point, it just kind of felt like, oh, I don't just need to tell these kinds of jokes. I like have to tell these kinds of jokes. Yeah. And then when I started doing it, it's like, when I started trusting my gut instead of listening to the people around me telling me not to do it, it just was such an amazing payoff, and it really resonated with like natives and non-native folks. So like, I guess I would say like piece of advice is just like, I don't know, kind of like F everybody else, do what you want to do.
Yeah. So I'm curious now. So has your tribe have seen your shorts you made?
Oh yeah. So I actually I was also a writer on a show called Spirit Rangers on Netflix that we partnered with my tribe. We got the blessing of my tribe to include like Cowlitz characters in the show, and using my tribe's language and stories inspired by my tribe's legends in the show. So I think that since then, members of my tribe have become like hyper aware of just like this stuff, honestly, to a concerning degree. My tribe has a weekly newsletter, and it's like sometimes I'll just see like interviews that I did that'll pop up in like the newsletter is just like Cowlitz the news. Joey Clift was interviewed by this podcast in Oklahoma. And I'm like, oh, I should maybe watch what I say more. But, I think that generally I feel so much love for my people. And I think that people in my tribe, I think, like what I'm doing and think that I'm funny, which is a really big relief.
So let's transition to your most recent film. So from doing those sketch comedies, how did this project come to be?
So some of my earliest jobs in Los Angeles were writing for shows like writing Looney Tunes shorts for Cartoon Network and things like that. And growing up, like I loved, like all those classic Looney Tunes shorts, Pixar shorts, and that kind of thing as a format. And then especially coming up through the UCB scene, I like developed this really great love for writing these big physical comedy bits. But I guess that I just never really saw sort of like contemporary Native people in that format. Like I've never seen, in animation, like a Native person on screen who is like as funny as Bart Simpson or who's allowed to be as funny as Bart Simpson. Usually we're kind of like, stereotypes, or it's like stories will focus on our trauma and stuff like that. So, with my background and with this in mind, I just had this as an idea for a short for like, honestly, a couple of years. And it felt like with my previous animated shorts and like all of the other things I've written on, it felt like this kind of felt like the next project that I like had to do. But the problem is that making cartoons costs money. Yeah. So, there were a couple of years where like it was just in the back of my mind is like, I don't know how I'm going to pay for this, but at some point I'm going to make this. And then fortunately, off of the success of that Gone Native Comedy Central series, I partnered with a really great organization called Pop Culture Collab and a really great impact producer named Mick Moore, who, just helped me find, the funding needed to make it. And then I brought on this really great animation production company called Flickr Lab that they've worked with like Stephen Colbert, Michael Moore, and a bunch of other big people. And they were really excited about the idea. And, once I put the team together and had the resources to make it, probably about like a year and a half ago, I was really just at the races for doing it. So part of it was like getting the idea for it. Yeah. And another part of it is like, how am I going to get the money to do this? And then just the pieces kind of fell into place.
So if people haven't seen your new short, POW, can you give them like a little premise of it or your
yeah, for sure. So POW is it's a getting naked playing with guns music video. Just kidding. That'd be really weird if it was like all this like heartfelt Native stuff, and then I'm like, so it's an AJJ tribute piece.
You're like, before the interview starts, ask me about that song.
So POW is it's an animated short about a young Native American kid trying to find a place to charge their video game console at a powwow. And it's based on my personal experiences being dragged by my mom to powwows when I was a kid. And through that process, like learning that loving my culture and loving video games don't have to be mutually exclusive. So it's a lot of big, silly physical comedy pieces, but also with like a really strong Native heart and message that it's putting forward. And it's about 8 minutes long.
Yeah, awesome. So one thing I like to ask about after these short forms are done and when you're at these festivals, from this project specifically, what did you learn personally about yourself? It could be filmmaking, it could be personal, that you came out of it with a new perspective on.
Wow, that's such a good question. So I guess I would say I didn't go to film school. I, studied to be like a TV news reporter or something like that. So for me, like making these animated projects, I'm kind of like learning by doing, and I'm also surrounding myself with really good people who are kind of helping guide me. But, after working on POW for probably about a year and a half from start to finish and wanting to make it for several years, like I'm so proud at the reaction that it's getting. And I think that for me, it's taught me that like, I'm like good at this, and, also that there is a market and an interest in contemporary Native stories from Natives and non-Natives. So, I would say that those are a couple big things that I learned. I've also learned that making stuff is hard. For me, like something that I really pride myself in are those small details. So there's a part of the short that's animated as ledger art, which if you aren't familiar with ledger art, it's this like Plains native art style where basically when the U.S. Army kind of brought Native folks to reservations, they left behind their military ledgers, like their military notebooks and stuff like that, with their notes still in them. And the Native folks picked up these notebooks and drew art on top of the notes, kind of in a real way, like turning their trauma into art. And Morgan Thompson, who is the character designer, an animator for the short, and a consulting producer, pitched to me like, "What if we animated the entire short as ledger art?" And I was like, "Oh, that might be too much, but this really great flashback sequence would be a really great fit for that." But because ledger art is like pre-existing documents, I was like, "Okay, what documents are we going to do this art on top of?" So I spent probably 3 or 4 months like getting the permission from the National Archives to use like the Fort Laramie Treaty and like a lot of other documents that are really important to Native history. And we have actual audio from the Standing Rock protests, which I got permission from a documentary crew that was on the ground during those protests in 2016. And it's something that your average person might not catch, but for me, like knowing that it's there is like so important to me. Yeah. So I think that like what I've learned is like how worth it is to go to the extra mile and how important it is as a filmmaker, especially because like making films are so hard.
Yeah,
it's like
very difficult.
Go that extra mile. Like
Yeah.
it's like even if you're the only person who notices that this really hyper specific cool thing is there, that's going to make you a million times more proud of the thing.
Yeah. So I always like to end these interviews on a question is we always sing the praises of what's on screen, right? Like usually if it's a film, you get cinematography, director, actors, whatever. What is an unsung hero that you probably won't get really the shout outs and stuff like that when people are watching the movie from your film pal? Who would you like to shout out?
Wait, an unsung hero that worked on the film?
Yeah, worked on the film.
Oh,
that people wouldn't really normally see on screen.
Yeah, so I mean it's animation, so there's not a lot of like people on screen, but I guess I would say that there are so many members of the cast and crew that I'm so excited to work with. Angela Starts, who hosts a really great podcast called Real Indigenous, who's Oklahoma-based and Native. She voices a really important character in the short, and she's somebody where I've guested on her podcast several times and didn't really know her in the context of her being an actor, but then I like saw her acting reel and just like she's just such a like warm person, and I sent her the script and she like really resonated with it, and I think that she really helps make the short what it is. I mentioned Morgan Thompson, who is also Oklahoma-based, who's a member of the Cherokee Nation, and she was so key in helping establish like the visual style of the short. Mick Moore has been such a great partner in getting funding and helping with impact producing and just bouncing ideas off of. Harold Moss with Flickr Lab. I could not have made this without him. Donnet Carey, who was worked on The Simpsons. He was an executive producer on POW, and he really helped make sure all the jokes were tight and good. And Jeff Carpenter, who's a member of the Chickasaw Nation, he was the sound designer, and I worked with him on Spirit Rangers, and it was so important to me to have somebody do the sound design who like knows what a powwow sounds like, and he just knocked it out of the park. And then I'm not sure how much of a gamer you are, but Jordan Kamalu, he was also the composer for Spirit Rangers. He's Indigenous Hawaiian. He did the soundtrack for it, and I wanted parts of the short to sound like chiptunes, specifically like from a Super Nintendo game.
Oh, okay.
And like Earthbound, if you're familiar with Earthbound, is a big inspiration. There's like sections of the short that are animated like Earthbound pixel art.
Okay, cool.
And for me to say to Jordan, "Oh, I would really love this to sound like the Earthbound soundtrack," and then the next day for him to jump on the phone with me and say like, "I read the instruction manual for the Super Nintendo sound chip and I know exactly how they did it," and like, so really just the whole team from top to bottom. Like, I'll also shout out my partner and co-producer Goldie Chan, who really helped with all aspects of production. Also just listening to me talk about this for 2 years, So yeah, just from top to bottom, there were so many people in the production who like made it what it is. And I'm so proud to have them as part of it.
Awesome. So before we go, would you like to shout out your upcoming projects or where they can follow you on social media or where they can eventually watch POW?
Yeah, for sure. So you can follow me on Instagram and Threads at Joey Clift with 5 or 6 eyes. That's because a 12-year-old took Joey Clift with 1 eye, so I just have to deal. And then you can follow me on Blue Sky, Twitter, and TikTok at Joeytainment. You can check out a lot of my other work at joeyclift.com. You can check out my Comedy Central digital series at gonenative.tv. I'm currently a writer on the show Rubble and Crew on Nickelodeon, and I think our most recent season just premiered, I want to say a few weeks ago, so definitely check that out. And POW is currently going through the film festival circuit, so it's not widely available quite yet. If you follow me on social media, you'll get all the updates as to when you can watch it.
Awesome. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Thanks for having me. And before we finish, we're shooting this in a bathroom, so I told myself I was going to start this hand dryer, so there we go.
I'm so curious how that's going to sound.
Yeah.